Oh, okay. I'll look for that. I'll get it. Yeah, I think we have it. I'll find it. Okay. So for this section, as I mentioned, we were talking about the guided highlighted reading, and it said especially for the upper grade levels. So this has kind of become a buzz. With the MESA units, if you're not familiar with this resource, so I'll step away from reading for a moment. If you're not familiar with this, if you've done the Lucy units in the past, you know that when you bought the kits, you got the Writing Pathways book there. But this is the newer variation of it. This was just released in October, and it ended up being closer to November before it was finally released. But this has got the new Common Core writing text types in it. And so what it does is it walks through the process of norming. And we've done this idea of norming in this group actually 2 years ago under this workshop leadership group, because Nellie and I have done this for 3 years. And we did this whole norming process 2 years ago. But anyways, Lucy goes through that piece again in the beginning here. But then she gets into opinion writing. There's a whole section on opinion. And then informational writing. And then narrative writing. And this resource gives you those learning progressions. So when you see a student writing, you look for what you see in it, and then you can size it up with what it suggests you might see aligned to Common Core around structure, development, and language conventions. So it gives you a whole idea of like, where does that writer fit? So you can go through the column and say, well, I see this, 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 and this. That's about a third grade writing level according to this progression and how it's set up. She also has rubrics and checklists to go with it. So this is well developed for writing. So now, please do.
The writing rubrics I find phenomenal because teaching first grade, it goes from K to second. So it really covers the majority of your range of writers. So you really have a good idea where they are, and then it gives you that next step, next 2 or 3 steps, where you need to be pushing them to go. So I found it really helpful instructionally.
Yep.
Really get a solid picture when I could draft.
Yep, and this has the K6, and then they have the 3-9. So for the 5th grade teachers, and even 3-9. And for 7th grade, it's going to have, and very good point about, it doesn't, even though you know where your student should be, it helps you find where they really are, and then it shows you those scaffolds to get them to the next step, or where you can challenge them going forward. Thank you.
Did you buy that yourself, or did your district provide that for you?
I
Or?
got it because I went to the assessment day last year.
Yep. Yep.
It was part of it, I think.
Yep. And I think it's I think it's $40-ish.
Oh, that's it?
So, yep, I think it's in that ballpark. Oh, there you go. So knowing this existed and knowing that the Teachers College did a lot of work about developing these aligned to Common Core, I found out through, again, my Muskegon cohort, she had teams of teachers go over Christmas time, December. They went to New York, and they are actually developing a reading continuum. And so imagine a reading continuum where you can sit down and listen to and make notes around what your students are demonstrating, and then being able to find where they're going to fit. They're in the very beginnings of that, so it's going to be a while. But that's kind of the buzz. Now that the MESA reading units are coming out, people are wondering, what does that continuum look like? So I can find out where my students are at, and I can find out next steps for reading instruction. So this has been such a buzz, and we've been having a lot of conversation around this from our perspective as consultants. And so this is a book that was recommended to me that might give you a head start on some of that thinking. It is aligned to the Fontes and Pinnell materials. So that it is obviously going to be a little bit adjusted toward that as far as like recommending that resource and different things. But there's a whole section in here. I mean, there's not many other parts of reading. So phonics, spelling and word study, oral, visual, and technological communication. So it's got Common Core language, but there's a whole section on guided reading. And so what I did was I pulled out in your packet the whole narrative on guided reading. Okay, and that's what I gave you as one resource. And what they suggest is that you do kind of a reading inventory or an assessment, whether it's a running record or whichever, and you kind of find approximately where that student lives in their reading. And then that's going to get you at that reading level. And so I gave you reading level T, which is about at that, I believe, 4th or 5th grade level. And so I pulled out just the T sample. And what they're giving you then are, if you have students that are reading at that level, what they give you are different things, different look-fors and prompts to consider to promote next, like what would you do with readers to help them strengthen the different components of reading. And it kind of goes through and says, if you're looking at it from, if you're looking at, first of all, it talks about selecting text, but once you get past the first page, it talks about what does it look like for the reader. So thinking within the text. I think it's within, around, let's see, what does it say here? Within, beyond, and about the text. And they're going to give you language you can use with students to help them think within, about, and beyond the text. It's going to give you prompts, questions, things you might give to students to help them really extend themselves as they're getting into the reading. Because as you're listening to a reader and you want to promote them to advance themselves in understanding and moving forward, there's the phonetic things in that they can do. But if they're reading, how do you get them to stretch themselves when they run into those more challenging pieces? And these are thought-provoking prompts that are specific for kids at this particular level to help them get forward. And this book then has those prompts for all those different levels, right? And so, again, to understand why that's important, that's why I pulled out this section of the narrative on the guided piece, and it's going to give you the thinking and reasoning as to why to do that. There's also these two resources, and these resources are set up kind of to do that same thing that are in all those reading levels, and you can go through and flip. So you might see here, okay, so I know this particular student is struggling with word beginnings. So this is the early on one. So I could go here to word beginnings, and it's going to give me different ideas and thinking around what is it I would teach to kids, how would I prompt them, and then reinforce it to help them with word beginnings. All right, so this is this first one, which as you can see it talks to oral reading and early writing. But then when we get further down the grade levels, we talk about comprehension, thinking, talking, and writing. And so in here, I want kids to work on the idea of synthesizing just in general, or making connections in general. So I can flip to that piece, and it's going to give me textual prompts about helping kids make those different connections and moving forward. So it's just a nice, and it's set up in a flip book kind of thing, but these are some of the resources that they're starting to come out with that are going to help us build our understanding. So we're right on the front edge of this, and I said to Nellie, I said, I'll be a little bit in front of this where I don't have this internalized like I do the writing, so I'm a little bit out there and sharing these resources with you. But I know this is what my consultant colleagues are also sharing, especially around these Mesa reading units. And like I said, probably within the next year to 2 years, we'll have a Lucy continuum around reading that we can use. So when we listen to kids and make notes and observations about the skills that they're applying, it'll help us find that place in the continuum. It'll give us ideas of how to move them forward or where did they come from as far as skills. So I'm not going to be able to get you enough time to really dig into this, but I just want to point out a couple key things in it. If you turn just to that I guess I did it front and back, I think. So the back of that first page, you see figure 1-6. You were asking for that guided reading. This is going to give you that structure, some structural ideas around guided reading. I'm sure a lot of you have done guided reading and gone through it, but with this structure set up the way that it is, and you can see that within that structure it talks about how you would kind of progress into and then around a text to kind of help a student be successful. It does further elaborate as you move on to the different pages, but if you look at 242, it also gives you a chart. Remember I talked about thinking within, about, and beyond? And so it's going to give you some of these generic strategies and considerations, and then the different processing pieces to do with those different strategic actions, as they call them. So I thought those were two really good charts. One kind of structures a guided reading, and then the other gives you some big idea strategies, and then the way to process those strategies out possibly. So I wanted to get those in your hands. This is on this cutting edge, and obviously you could go out and buy this book and get lost in it. I mean, it's very research-based, very wordy, but I wanted to at least give you a piece of it, especially around the guided highlighted reading, so you could dig into it and get into that. But I think this is where, I think that we're right on the cusp of these resources and trying to make sense of these continuums. And I think because writing set itself up so nicely, I think the Teachers College is moving in that direction with reading, and these are resources that I know they're promoting that can help us get there. So I wanted to get those in front of you, and we were going to possibly do an analysis of it and dig deeper into the prompts and thinking, but as usual, we had really good conversation. And you know, I told Nellie at the beginning of this series, and it's not that she doesn't agree, but it's what I've learned from the summer conference is that it's so much more powerful when you guys are talking and having conversation than when we are. And so I've tried very hard to let it be about you and your discussions and about us and what we're bringing to the table. We just want to give you resources to prompt that discussion. So on that note, that's what we've accomplished. So yeah.
I'm wondering if anybody in here is using the Macy unit and then using guided reading.
And I don't use that I use weekly stuff. We are.
You know, I'm supposed to do this with Ms. Mason, that's it.
Oh, and not the guided reading?
Well,